Well, to further look into the recent Israeli aggression against Palestinians, we're now joined by Press TV's very own Mona Kandil, who's with us from Ramallah. Also, we have activist and political commentator Laith Marouf, who's with us from the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mona in Ramallah. Please bring us up to speed on the aftermath of the recent deadly Israeli raid that took place in the city of Nablus yesterday.
Not only the city of Nablus, we can say all the occupied West Bank cities are witnessing a day of anger and a sad day after the massacre that was carried out in Nablus, leading to the martyrdom of 11 Palestinians in Nablus alone, including 3 elderly over the age of 60. What happened yesterday is that Israeli forces raided Nablus city, claiming that they want to arrest or kill Palestinian fighters who are accused of being part of the Palestinian resistance or planning to carry out a number of anti-Israel operations. They surrounded a building there. They clashed with Palestinians inside it, and at the end of the day, they left the city after killing 11 Palestinians and wounding over 100 Palestinians. Today, a general strike, a day of anger, had been declared across the occupied West Bank with no schools, no transportation. Maybe let's say it's a way of expressing Palestinian sadness and anger amid calls from the Palestinian resistance groups for the Palestinians to go to the areas where Israeli military checkpoints are located, and there's a clear call to clash with the Israeli forces. Up till the moment, no, let's say, protests and demonstrations have taken place today, but it's a general strike, a day of anger. Palestinian resistance groups have vowed to respond to the killing of those 11 Palestinians in Nablus. And we have to mention that with the martyrdom of 11 Palestinians in Nablus, since the beginning of this year, 17 Palestinians were killed in Nablus alone, with dozens others had been killed in the occupied West Bank and in Al-Quds.
Right. Laith Marouf, I want to get your perspective on the recent escalation of the Israeli violence against Palestinians. In addition to that, also, I want to get your views on the response that we've been seeing from not just various countries, but also from the Palestinian Resistance Front, Hamas, Islamic Jihad. They've stated that the Israelis will see the consequences of the increasing of their aggression and their crimes. Are we on the cusp of a third intifada?
Well, look, everybody's playing right now a waiting game because, for instance, yesterday, the former prime minister of the Zionist colony, Lapid, stated that the economy of Israel will collapse in 6 months, that there will be a civil war within that 6 months in Israel. So what we see is that the resistance axis knows that there is a huge possibility of this internal collapse and civil war in Israel, and so they are trying to be patient and allow those things to roll out. At the same time, Netanyahu and his ilk know that, and they have their only way to avoid a civil war inside Israel and an internal collapse of the colony is through either creating a war with the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza and in Jerusalem, and or trigger a wider regional war. The threats increased to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and also yesterday, as we saw, the Israelis shelled South Lebanon, hitting a home under construction and a few farmlands in between the houses in a village in the south of Lebanon. So the Zionists are attempting in any way possible to externalize their contradictions within the state of Israel to create a war that could distract the contradictions within their own colony.
Let's go back to Mona. Mona, what can you tell us about how Palestinians feel about the international silence, a lack of proper response as we see these crimes continuing? Specifically, they've been escalating not just this year, but over the past several months.
Since the beginning of 2023, 64 Palestinians have been killed from Palestinian territory. And what the Palestinians are receiving are only condemnation from the international community. It's not enough for the Palestinians. Condemnation is okay, but they need from the international community to translate their statements into acts on ground. Israel must be Israeli soldiers and Israeli military officials must be persecuted for the crimes. This is what the Palestinians want. Several cases had been taken to the International Criminal Court to bring Israeli criminals into justice to be prosecuted, but nothing is going on. What the international community is doing is condemning Israeli crimes, at the same time condemning Palestinian acts of resistance, as if equaling between the victims and the criminals. It's not accepted for the Palestinians, so that's why they are fed up. They also want, and they consider it could be a good position from the Arab states. They want an immediate stop of the normalization of relations. Palestinians are demanding that at least Arabs should stop all acts of relations with the Israeli regime, and a more serious action from the international community. But at the end of the day, as long as the Israeli regime feels it's supported and backed by the American administration, then they would continue to act as a state above the law. They would continue to act their crimes against the Palestinians, knowing that nothing would happen against them.
Laith Marouf, Palestinian officials, they've requested an emergency session of the UN Security Council on the Israeli massacre in Nablus. Just a few weeks ago, we saw another UNSC session with regards to Israeli crimes. How do they keep getting away by committing these crimes? And also, how can that status quo ever change?
Well, they will continue to get away with it because we have a stalemate at the Security Council where the Americans and the French and the British continue to veto any real action against the state of Israel. And what that means is that everybody has to remember that international law is not de jure. It's not what's written and what's in courts. It is de facto. Is what can you bring through brute force into fact. And the Palestinians and any country and any people that want to be sovereign must bring that sovereignty through brute force. And so ultimately there will be no liberation of Palestine through groveling at the feet of the West or the Security Council. As we saw this statement that came out was even a compromise of a withdrawal by the United Arab Emirates of a motion that was supposed to come to the Security Council for a condemnation. So now we have just a statement that is nothing, that's ink on paper. So we have to look at the ground in Palestine. The resistance has clearly chosen to delay any response, as we see right now. But maybe this window of delay, hoping for the collapse of Israel internally, is going to close through force by the Zionists, who will force a battle on the resistance, because otherwise the price of having patience and waiting, as we see, grows higher and higher every day, especially with the collaborationist forces of the PA helping the Zionist target the leadership of the new resistance in the West Bank is becoming too costly to stay back and not engage militarily.
Mona, before we leave you, let's talk about the Palestinian reprisal attacks and anti-Israeli operations that have taken place. We've seen some even being carried out in the heart of Tel Aviv. How significant are these reprisal attacks as we're seeing Palestinians venting their anger against the Israeli crimes and the Israeli occupation?
Well, we have to say that at first Israeli military operations had focused on, excuse me, on Nablus and Jenin in order to fight the newly formed resistance groups known as the Lion's Den as well as Jenin brigades. The Israelis thought that the confrontations would only be in the occupied West Bank with fighting Palestinian resistance fighters or even Palestinian youths who are not affiliated to any of the militant groups. They were mistaken. In the last year, a number of Palestinians whom clearly their families declared that they were not affiliated to any of the resistance groups went, as you have mentioned, to the heart of Tel Aviv and other Israeli areas, those lands that were occupied in 1948, and they carried out deadly operations against, of course, full-armed Israeli soldiers and full-armed Israeli settlers. They thought that the Israelis succeeded to prevent Palestinians from going to the areas such Tel Aviv and other Israeli cities. They were mistaken because Palestinians are still, many Palestinian youths are still courage, and they insist to fight the Israeli soldiers as one of the options left for them, the resistance option, of course, as a normal response to the daily raids of West Bank areas, to the aggression and oppression being carried out by the Israeli soldiers in the city of Al-Quds. Israel has been carrying out numerous operations, imposing more facts on ground, imposing more aggressive measures to force the Palestinians out of the city of Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and even suffocating them. So Palestinians today continue to send clear messages that they would continue to fight until liberating all the areas and freeing it. And they consider that the historic Palestine is, of course, theirs and not to the Israelis.
Laith Marouf, before we close out this segment, I want to get your thoughts also on the significance of the reprisal attacks being carried out by Palestinians.
Well, it clearly shows the collapse of the ability of Israel to monitor all activities of the resistance in the West Bank and inside 1948 territories. And this also shows that, as we see right now, every time the Zionists attempt to enter Palestinian towns and villages in the West Bank, there's fierce fighting. That means that there is continued bringing of weapons to the resistance in the West Bank, and that's a huge success for the axis of resistance. And who knows how much of that, more weapons have arrived in the West Bank to ready the population for a war with the Israelis. Ultimately, right now, the Zionists are stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they don't fight the resistance in the West Bank, there will be an internal civil war. And if they fight the resistance in the West Bank, we will have an open regional war that will, bring an end to the Zionist colony. In both cases, the end is coming for the Zionists, and this is thanks to the continued resistance by the Palestinian people and not giving up under all these pressures.
All right, thanks a lot. Activist and political commentator Laith Marouf joining us from the Lebanese capital, Beirut, and a special thanks to Press TV's very own Mona Kandil joining us from Ramallah.